I cannot. Since they haven't done the talk, I have to do it.
You signed up for this one. That's fine.
I don't want to.
I will read it.
Okay.
Send me.
Me too, but it's not. I will listen for 5 minutes. We're on 1717. Oh, okay.
And did you know Subaira?
Which one?
The Bayrak in my picture. That was yeah.
From where is it?
Istanbul, like from
Oh.
2007.
Alright.
Guys, have a seat. Two more minutes.
Sorry.
Give it one more minute. Hey, how are you doing?
Hello everyone, I'm Shala from the Wellbeing Club. Welcome. We have Ibrahim here today with us, and he's going to talk about empathy and compassion during global conflicts and climate change. I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't checked in already, you can come by me at the end of the talk, or you can scan the QR here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the club, what is well-being opposed to wellness? The two terms you've probably heard, sometimes they're used interchangeably, but I would argue there is a difference. And the difference is going to explain my approach to the subject. Wellness is simply a term that came as an opposite to illness, okay? Now, I want you to think of what does that connotate. If wellness is the opposite of illness on a spectrum, what's the suggestion? The suggestion is this: it's a state that can be fixed, right? You deal with your illness, you will achieve wellness. It's a state that can be fixed, but I want you to think about, when we think about Western society and illness, right? We usually think about it being fixed through either taking a specific pill or seeing a psychologist, right? For me, well-being is more of an active process. You see, by definition, well-being is not the opposite. There is no opposite of it. Is it bad being, right? Do you see how on a spectrum, the fact that it doesn't have its opposite of bad being suggests something that it's independent of itself. It's a process on a daily basis that I would argue is connected to rewiring the way our minds think. So how do we rewire our minds to take part in this process called well-being? Well-being is a process that can be achieved if you conceive the world a bit differently. And a lot of times I argue it's the words we use. The words we use to describe our surroundings are part of this programming that kind of predisposes us to seeing the world in a negative fashion. Now, when I say to see the world in a negative fashion, let's look at it this way. How do we have compassion during global conflict and climate change? Let's look at the last 10 years. We're approaching the year 2024. I want you to see this picture. And notice when I gave this talk earlier, when I gave this talk earlier back in the year 2021, I was smiling. What ancient philosophy could teach us about modern happiness, okay? Because I thought that was during a pandemic. Okay, what's happened since 2021? Well, let's even go back. What's happened since 2014? On a personal level, actually, let's begin with not just 2014, 2012, that led to a really bad series of events happening. In 2012, I'll just tell you what I've gone through. And a lot of these events we probably shared as a global community. For me, 2012 was coming from the Middle East when the Syrian civil war got reached a very destructive phase. And for me, even though I have a connection to Iraq, most of my life I didn't know Iraq because my family was exiled from there. So for me, it was Syria that I knew really well. It's when I watched the news, I could put a memory to the places I saw being destroyed on TV. It wasn't that way with Iraq. 2 years later, in the chaos that emerged in Syria, a group called ISIS was born. And ISIS not only ravaged Syria, but also my ancestral Iraq. Okay, so you have the emergence of ISIS. 2015, then what happened? Another country that I know intimately. I know every inch of this country. I witnessed its destruction. And that was Yemen. Okay. 2016, something happened politically. We go from ISIS, and I really do want to put this on the same line. T-Bag, welcome. Thank you for coming. From 2016, what emerged? Something that gave me a lot of stress. The presidential campaign and then the eventual presidency of Donald Trump. I really thought things could go really bad under his presidency. So that was 4 years of constant stress. Okay. Then let's follow it up. After we have Trump, what do we have? By 2020, I was actually here on January 8th, 2020. Now imagine this. When I had the students here, what did I tell them? It's a new decade. Welcome. Why aren't you guys happy and looking forward to it? God, imagine that in 2020. Now, I'll tell you why. I basically said, I am bringing you together for the first lecture of your decade, the 2020s. What do you have to look forward to? It was a rhetorical question. I knew they didn't have much to look forward to, right? You see, when you came of age in the 1990s, when you were entering that decade, it seemed like the world was going into a positive direction. The Cold War had just ended. It was the beginning of globalization. It seemed that the world would come together. Going into the 2000s, it seemed even better. There was supposed to be some computer virus that would destroy the world and never happened, a computer glitch called Y2K. Unfortunately, it never happened. And once that was solved, things seemed to go positively, right? Again, the Cold War had ended. It was a year before 9/11. Everything seemed bright and sunny on the eve of the 21st century. 2010s, okay, a financial crisis had happened around 2008. It seemed things were getting better, particularly your generation was enthusiastic about the election of Barack Obama. By 2020, what happened? Why did I look at a bunch of glum faces sitting at their first lecture of 2020? What do you think students were panicking about in 2020? Yes? No, not COVID. No, actually, not COVID. This was when your campus was in this place in Murcia de Molina. And that campus actually had a library. And I was right there before, I was reading in the library before I went upstairs.
Conflict with USA.
And Iran. What was the most Googled search term? On January 8th, 2020, how did World War I break out? Is World War III going to break out? That's what we were worried about. That's why they were glum. And sure enough, it had a lot to do again. Why was I stressed since his election? Because, yes, that hair trigger response to any international relations challenge was worrying. Okay, so sure enough, yes, students were worried about World War I breaking out in their lifetime. Of course, in their lifetime would be World War III. But remember how World War I broke out? It was because of an assassination in this case. What else were they worried about? remember half of Australia was on fire. Yeah, the bush. Yeah, it seems it's not too long ago, but it seems like so long ago. You have these tragic images of koala bears escaping for their life, kangaroos escaping the flames, and I had some Australian students. If you wanted an indication of climate change, that was it. And there is no doubt that the science is basically really straightforward to connect climate change with the bushfires in Australia. There was an anomalous weather event in the Indian Ocean. And you can't believe what happens is go all the way to Kenya and Australia. I know that's a shout out to you. I know. You go all the way from Kenya to Australia and you'd be surprised they're connected by the same weather system. Literally, what can happen on the Indian Ocean as a result of climate change is on one end, it could be really dry in Australia and really wet in Kenya, or vice versa. Australia gets a lot of moisture and Kenya is extremely dry. So what did that mean? Because Australia was extremely dry, it was ripe for those bushfires. What was happening on the Kenyan side, and people don't realize this still happened, it was plagued by a swarm of locusts. I mean, this was like biblical proportions of calamities, right? Yeah, sure enough, there was a swarm of locusts working their way from Kenya. Do you know what a locust swarm is, by the way? It's crazy. You don't realize it. A grasshopper by itself is just a grasshopper, but I swear, this is what grasshoppers will do. When a bunch of them get together, somehow they come to an agreement. We could work a lot more efficiently if we swarm. And I swear, it's basically a swarm. A locust is just referring to a group of grasshoppers working together to create a storm where they go in tandem and just work their way through fields. And they reached all the way to Iran. Yes. What did I have to tell the students? Sure enough, all those things are bad. But let me tell you what you should really be worried about. Because what had I been working on as a historian was pandemics. And what did my work as a historian of pandemics say? Do you know back in 2017, I was pitching to IE University, we really need to have a class on the politics of pandemics. The next one is coming, and we should be prepared intellectually. And they said, no, not really. We don't think that's going to ever happen. Anyway, so when I read in the newspaper, in the Financial Times, an article about this big, about a new virus emerging in a market in Wuhan, I said, this is the big one. And basically I said to those students, this is what you should be worried about. What an awful thing to say. All the things you're worrying about, forget it. There's something much more palpable in your lives on the horizon. Okay. And sure enough, it wasn't until March 11th when the pandemic was officially declared, if I'm not mistaken, or around March 20th, I can't remember. Then we have the pandemic. Okay, very good. So that was a good 3 years of our lives. And then what followed? Climate change seemed to get only worse because the pandemic just took international attention. There was real momentum right before the pandemic hit on working with climate change. And momentum was diverted. And then let's think, what do we have? We have a current conflict in the Middle East where everyone asks me, is the potential for World War III back again? Here we are in 2023, going into 2024. It's been a decade like this. So then, when I was asked to speak about empathy and compassion, these were two words given to me. How can we have this during all this time that I just mentioned? Whether it's the decade I've lived in, whether it's the next 10 years you are going to enter, how does one have empathy and compassion during these tumultuous times? And again, this is where well-being comes in. Okay. So here is the first two questions that are going to guide us for the time we have together. And it's the questions are Socratic. The answers I'm going to give you are very Taoist. The Socratic question is this, and for those of you who aren't familiar with Socrates, Socrates was eventually killed for asking questions that really pissed people off. That's just my philosophical take on the life of Socrates. Socrates might have approached you in the agora and asked you randomly, what is stress? Now, you would all give me an answer, and then you would have follow-up questions. So what is stress? This is my first question to you. I assume, let me find somebody who I know is going to be stressed. You have a midterm coming up. Aren't you stressed? Kind of, okay. So Socrates would say, okay, what is stress?
I mean, it's a feeling of you feel your heart beating.
Okay, if you feel your heart beating, very good. What is stress?
The overall lack of alignment with what is currently happening in your life. So being conditioned either by past circumstances, or especially your mind just diverting into the future, in which you start considering all the set of options that may go right or go wrong.
Okay, it's interesting that you put a temporal aspect in it. It's something that you project into the future, yes?
I sometimes, from my personal perspective, I relate stress with fear because stressing means you care, and I think caring is like fear of failing. So
If Socrates were alive now, he'd be very angry because he
Right.
came to his answer really quickly. He would,
sorry.
yeah, no, don't be sorry for getting the right answer. But Socrates was an asshole. That's why they killed him. I shouldn't say that, but sorry, I don't know where going. Yeah.
More than the future itself, uncertainty. So
Okay.
not knowing the future.
Okay. Very good. So we're getting into kind of what is called the ontology of stress, the essence of stress.
It is a metaphor that it's very stress. It's like being in a cage with a lion. You cannot escape.
I like it.
I mean, you cannot escape from the lion, and you don't know if the lion is gonna escape too, or it's gonna eat you, but you are afraid of what's gonna happen.
Okay, that was profound. I'm just going to repeat it in the microphone just in case. The metaphor of the cage with the lion. I like that. Okay. Now that you've, the thing is, none of your answers are wrong. Okay, I just was trying to get you in a particular direction that you got to really quite quickly. The Taoists would say to understand something, you have to understand its opposite. And the symbol of Taoism, you've probably seen it, is the yin yang with the white, the alternating white and black pattern. What's the opposite of stress? Peace. Okay, peace, calm.
Acceptance.
Guys, come on in. Hey. No, don't worry. The opposite of stress is calm, peace. Anything else?
Alignment.
Alignment. Okay. So that's what the Taoists would always ask, is go to the extreme to understand its essence. Okay. A Taoist, in Taoism, the philosophy is this. Okay. How can you know beauty unless you've experienced ugliness? How can you know love unless you've experienced hate? So in other words, when you say the opposite of stress is calmness, peace, and alignment, what if I told you this? No, I would say the opposite of stress is depression. I want you to think about this. And why do I mean by that? The opposite of stress is depression. Stress, I would argue, is really distress, okay? I'm gonna put this here. Think about it. When you are suffering from depression, what's the matter? You can't get out of bed. There's nothing that animates you. What gets you out of bed in the morning besides coffee? Okay. You have nothing to care about. Isn't that the essence of depression? You have nothing waiting to motivate you. You have no passion. So you see, what I'm trying to get you, instead of thinking of stress as a negative phenomenon, stress is what happens because you care about something. Don't you care about your academic career? I assume you don't, daddy doesn't have a great corporation where he's going to hire you after you graduate, right? So you do have this, you stress about your career. You care about your career. You care about at least your educational path. And I assume a good number of you do. Okay. So in other words, look at the way, because stress is usually something we try to avoid, right? We'd be happy if we were not to have stress. But what I want to tell you is, no, perhaps stress. And there is a word for in Japanese of what gets you out of bed in the morning. Okay. Ikigai, yeah? What about if I say this? No, stress is a good thing. Stress in your life demonstrates you have something to care about.
It makes me think about.
What's your name? I've known you from previous meetings, but I never. Caroline, yes.
So it makes me think of something that, I did a sport in high school, and something they would, or like I would tell myself is that essentially stress or nervousness, like the anxiety you feel, is also the same biological response as excitement. And so you just have to, like, even though you react the same, like physically, mentally it's different. So kind of the two sides of the same coin on that aspect.
You say, yeah, it's not what gave you the adrenaline. I used to run track. And for that reason, I remember my very last track meet in college. And again, because I couldn't handle the stress, I was looking forward to having my final match. For this reason, I was just like I didn't think about it because I didn't think about stress in those days. As running was good for me. It was exhilarating. I just thought about the adrenaline was too much for me to handle. Very good. Stress is what you care about. Now, if I can make that something that kind of makes you reimagine stress, then let me put it this way. Stress is what you care about. Guys in the back, what are you stressing about at the moment? If stress is what you care about, sorry? Say it again.
Assignment that I have.
No, not the assignment. What all three of you only have an assignment, but what do all three of you stress about at this moment? If stress is something you care about. Muda? Okay, your homeland.
Yeah.
Okay, you see, because in that case, that's what's causing you stress, right? All right, so because remember what I say, how do you? Now, this is a lecture on empathy and compassion. You don't probably think about it that way, right? But it is something that's causing you stress at this moment, right? But you never thought about it as something that is really a reflection of how much you care about your homeland, you see. The minute you think about this, the moment now that I tell you, all of you are stressed about what's going on in your homeland, right? At least, mentally, you could always say, all right, at least if I'm stressed, what is that a reflection of? How much I care. At least that way, then, in your mental loop, you've given yourself a coping mechanism. This is what I hope to give you today, those who you are connected to a piece of land that is witnessing conflict as we speak. It's a coping mechanism. That's what I would argue then. Okay, now, so what I'm trying to get you to do is now to say, how do you handle stress? Reimagine it as something you care about. Now I want you to imagine it as something else. So here's my next Socratic question. What is passion? Now, it's ironic that when I ask what is passion, can you just Google something for me? It's passion because I'm going to embarrass somebody here again today. You'll see what. Okay. Can you Google something called, go to Google if you don't mind. And actually, I'll type in the terms.
We have it here.
I know it's complicated, yeah. Very good, perfect. Perfect, yes. Okay, so here's my next Socratic question. In Spanish is with one S, right? And don't ask me how I know this. Yeah, okay. So this is how I learned Spanish. When we think of passion, right? We might think of this, right? Pasión de Morena. Okay, and again, her face is turning red because everyone we know will meet Morena. So when we think of passion, right? We think of something we see on, perfect, thrilling new telenovela on Joy TV. When we think of passion, this is what we think about, right? Passion. Pasión de Morena, okay? When I say the word passion, this is what might come to your mind, okay? But then, did you wonder this kind of the dissonance, right? At the same time, even though this is what we might think about a film like The Passion of Christ. Or think about like places, they don't do it so much in Western European countries, but in Mexico or the Philippines, they have what are called passion processions on Easter, right? On Easter, what do you do where you literally beat yourself to commiserate with the pain of Jesus? They're called passion plays. In Mexico and the Philippines, there are still people who will crucify themselves or walk with a cross. It's hard to imagine. Yeah, but that still happens. And those are called passion plays. So what is the connection between Pasión de Morena and the Passion of Jesus? Are we saying, Jesus was such a passionate guy. Look at him and his six-pack. If he came back to earth, I would totally do it. Is that what we're saying when we're talking about Jesus being passionate? No. I want you to think of the word passion because it comes back. It is actually related, both the word empathy and compassion both share the same Greek root. They both share the same Greek word. And then when we put sim, com. How many of you know what the passion is in your life? Lorene, what's your passion? Yeah.
Finish the course.
Okay, no, that's not your passion. I'll tell you why. That's not your passion. Who knows what their passion? And okay, who am I? You might say, Mr. Socrates, tell me that's not my passion. Well, what about you? What's your passion?
The government of my country.
What's the government of your country? Israel? I would say that's not your passion. I'll tell you why.
But I would like to improve. That's a
I'll tell you what, working, I think it's a bit different. What else is passion?
To live my life to the fullest that I can.
To live your life to the fullest?
My material concerns.
I would say that's not your passion. Okay, and I'll tell you why according to the definition I'm giving you. Thank you for volunteering, everyone.
I was just going to say, at least in the future, will be helping people and children.
Okay, that's a better answer. Okay, I'll tell you why.
My passion is to free my land.
Okay. Almost there. Okay. Almost there. And you'll see what the answer I'm looking for is.
I would say it can be anything in the sense that after all, it's just this burning feeling that you tangibly and physically feel within your body. So some sort of dissonance, which pushes you to share something with the rest of the world, or which pushes you to people in your surroundings to become aware of how you're feeling in this moment. So for instance, Dostoevsky in one of his novels, Notes in the Underground, I'm not sure if this is the right title, Apuntes del Subsuelo is the name in Spanish. At the very beginning of the book, he explains how he loves to complain all of the time, and when he harms himself, he does it out of pure pleasure, in the sense of not being like a sadist, but just like wanting other people to realize. So he also gives the example of Cleopatra and how she would enjoy like inserting needles in her slaves so that people become aware. So after all, just to sum up, I would say just sharing some burning feeling and, you know, in a way, attracting others' attention into you.
Okay. Even the feeling part, I would rephrase it. Okay. And so let me try to do it with this exercise and what I've tried to set up with you. If passion literally means, in the ancient Greek, suffering. Okay, let me put it this way. When we talk about the passion of Christ, what are we literally saying? We're referring to, in its original Greek sense, the suffering of Jesus. So how did suffering go from the suffering of Jesus in ancient Greek to a telenovela? And now I want you to answer this question. How many of you do not know what your passion is? Raise your hands. Okay, very good. Let me try to answer this question. Without which in your life would you suffer? If you can answer that immediately, you know what your passion is. Okay, so in other words, those who gave me an answer, right? It didn't fit the question I was asking. Without which in your life would you suffer? If something comes immediately to mind, you found your passion. Or passions. If we're lucky, we'll have one. We might not have any. And maybe then if we don't have any, that's why people have depression. What is depression then? You see, your passion will cause you to stress. Okay, you don't think of this as stress, right? But if passion is suffering, then is not stress a form of suffering? But what am I trying to tell you? It's a good form of suffering. It's something that you have something good to suffer for.
What if my passion, what I care about is family?
Yes, of course. And then you're lucky. Of course, absolutely. See, that's the thing. Without our family, we would suffer. Do you have a brother or sister? Brother? Sisters, yeah. Yeah. One time a female student said, yeah, I'm passionate about my brother. And I was like, yeah, that's good. But, you know, keep it quiet because people might not understand you out of context. People might, yes, absolutely, we're passionate. And if you can say that, then you're lucky. Because we also have to assume some people don't have that passion. People don't have a family. Or they have a bad relationship with their parents. They are not passionate about their parents or their siblings. So on one level then, I've given you the answer. During times of global conflict and climate change, okay, on one level, if you have that passionately, okay, that's one element to be grateful for. When you'll have kids, you'll be passionate about them because you're going to stress about them. You're going to stress about their future and their health and their well-being. Absolutely. Okay. What else? Now that I said that, everyone who gave me an answer. Okay, so the two answers I heard, right? The two answers I heard, without which will you suffer? Do you see why I said it's the wrong answer? So give me the right answer then. Without which will you suffer? Without which you'll suffer. Is it really government work? Who is really passionate about government work? No. But your answer was there. Without which will you suffer?
But do you think passion can go without suffering? I think.
Tell me how. Hypothetically. Can passion be without suffering? Well, let's work it out. No. You see, then by definition, it's not a passion. You're not passionate about it.
So passion is very subjective. So it's something very subjective. You cannot say what is passion.
Well, let's see what is subjective. Would you say that your passion about family is subjective? I would say not. I would say not. Well, I don't know. It depends on the relationship you have with your family. Yeah, it's absolutely. Absolutely. Well, now if I've given you this answer, now people give me, okay, here, let me do it this way. Does anyone know what I'm passionate about, without which I suffer? Teaching. Thank you, Iker. Iker, you've gotten that. And without teaching, I suffer. So that even when summer comes along, I don't take that holiday. I usually teach during the summer as well. Not at the university that I teach at, but so teaching is something that causes me to suffer. Now, The thing is, am I always happy while I'm teaching? Now, Ika can answer the question, no, particularly when students in our class talk. Yes, okay. Now, the thing is passion happiness? No, you see. To have your passion, you're happy. But what is happiness? It's not about happy feelings. You see, what did Ika said? My happiness is teaching. But there's sometimes when I'm in class, I get very angry because there is a couple of kids who will never shut up, right? Then am I happy at that moment? No.
It's only that moment. If you're constantly unhappy in something that you think is your passion, that's not your passion.
Okay, there you go, exactly. But do you see then? Because none of us can be 24 hours happy, right? We're not. So in other words, that's not the secret to life. Yeah, your passion means having something to stress about, something you care about. And at one level, that will give you joy. You found your joy. But it's not then, but you see, everything is not about 24 hours happiness, because 24 hours happiness is only if something were on drugs. We're gonna have that, right? Exactly. Exactly. So in other words, learning, freeing your land. Or is it something, it's your land that you're passionate about? Give me your passion in one word then. For me, it's teaching.
Freedom.
Okay.
Freedom and
Without that, you're gonna suffer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in order to get to that, we're also gonna suffer.
And remember what the class, let's go back. Can you go back? Remember, now you've gotten to the essence of this lecture. We go back to the first slide. Okay. Oh, yes, please. We could go to the first. I should have the remote control, but yes. Okay. Now do you see what I'm saying? Empathy is this: recognizing Lorraine's passion or her suffering. That's all that is with empathy. Iker, can you hypothetically ever experience the suffering of Lorraine? No. No, but now that I've explained this in this way, this is how you could be in passion with her. That's the essence of empathy. Okay. Anyone else then? Has anyone just discovered their passion? A good number of you have discovered all of a sudden, yes, I'm passionate about my family because I've just given you a way to reframe it.
I have a question. I think then there's a big difference when you have passion for something material, something tangible or intangible, and when you have passion for an action. Because you say you have passion for teaching.
Very good, very good.
There's a difference.
That's different. Okay, so very good. And I'm going to give you somebody who's going to give you an answer to this. Angel. So the question you asked, Angel, somebody had an answer for it and it was quite profound.
Do you think sometimes passion can be because of empathy? Because I feel like it sometimes could be the reverse.
Absolutely. It has to be. I wouldn't be passionate about teaching unless I could empathize with students. Absolutely. So in other words, if you want to do work to help the unfortunate, right? By essence, you have a sense of empathy. By essence. You're not a psychopath, you see. And do you see here the psychopath again? Here it comes.
Can your passion be your religion?
Would you suffer without your religion?
Yes.
Then that's your passion. Absolutely, you're passionate about it. If somebody took it away from you, you see, your passion in that case, it's a need. Okay, and that's what's now to answer your question, I'll get to it. In our life, we are confronted with needs and interests. Interests we can negotiate over. Needs are things that you can never take away from us. So in other words, Lorraine, your connection to a land, that's a need. No one can take, you could negotiate over, interests are this. If Mona wants to borrow an outfit, you can negotiate with her and say, yeah, you can borrow that outfit from me, and it wouldn't be a problem, right? If somebody came to you and say, take away your identity, your connection to a piece of land, you wouldn't give that up. You don't negotiate over those things, you see. None of us would. Most of us would not give up our identity. Actually, since Chala is here, let me show an interesting dynamic, if you don't mind. Another interesting dynamic. It's not universal. Having said this connection to land, we have to see I'll give you an interesting dynamic here. Can you Google, oh, thank you. Are you willing to die for your country? Let me see this. Okay, let's look at the following. And for those of you in my class, we'll be eventually looking at this map. There are people who are passionate about their country in differing levels. In Europe, I drew there, excuse my language. I don't know why this isn't going. Look at this question here. Okay, here, perfect. Are you willing to fight for your country?
Fight or die? Or
Die, I think. What was the question, die? Like I said, people's needs differ across Europe. Which country would you say in Europe is the most passionate? Finland! Finland at 74% is willing to die for the
So is Finland getting into?
World War II. In World War II, the Soviet Union was about to invade Finland, and they've never forgotten that.
Oh.
Yeah, the question was not in your
Country.
Let's
Yeah.
not die.
That's not that, it's
Okay,
final
okay.
word.
Let me
That's what we have to make sure.
Would you
Would you
fight?
fight
Oh,
for your
okay,
country?
Oh, well, that changed.
A
That
lot
changed
of
the
missing
context
data.
slightly.
Oh,
Great.
74%. Would you say that's a passion though?
Yes.
Compared to what's at the bottom? Does anyone know the look? The Netherlands at 15. Probably because they're too stoned to answer the question. No, I'm joking. Bad stereotype. What country comes in at number 2?
Turkey. No.
In terms of fighting, yeah, Turkey.
Oh, you meant second.
Turkey, 73%, because Turkey as a country just celebrated its 100-year anniversary, and that was born out of a war. Yes, and then number 2 on the other spectrum at 18 is Germany for good reason. Now, you could be passionate for your country and still not want to fight for it, right? But I'm just saying, this is a need. This reflects a need. When you're answering this question, it's a need. Get me back to the PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do now is just to show you a couple of slides from a speech. So hopefully I've gotten you to think about stress differently, got you to think about passion differently. Now I'm going to go through a different Socratic exercise. And I could have gotten this from the internet, but I thought it's more interesting if I took how a person's graduation speech, his name is David Foster Wallace. And he, in a graduation speech, gave a profound answer to, again, how do we have empathy and compassion during global conflict? So I'm going to read the following parts of his speech. As if how we construct meaning were not actually a matter of personal, intentional choice, of conscious decision. What is he saying? Let's jump to page 36. Everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid and important person in existence. Okay, so on page 36, here comes an interesting dilemma. How does one have empathy? When at 36, this is absolutely true. Can any of us say that we don't see ourselves as the center of our universe? What is, well, let's see, let's work it out. Let's see what he means by this. What do we mean? He's saying in terms of the way we experience the world, we see the world in front of us, behind us, all in front of the monitor. Why not?
So it's different if you say like I believe that like I'm the center of my universe, or saying like I'm the center of the universe. If you believe you're the center of the
He's
universe,
arguing I'm the center of my universe. All of us do that as a default setting. Yeah. No. If you say I am the center of the universe, that's usually called a psychopath.
yeah.
No, that's not what he's talking about. He's not giving a lecture to a group of psychopaths, about to leave the penitentiary. He's giving a lecture to a group of college students who just got a degree in liberal arts. Something like a graduation speech that you might get upon graduating from IE. So imagine this kind of setting. You're giving a graduation speech, and hopefully you pass your exam, you pass your assignment, so that one day you'll go to a graduation speech. And what is he trying to get us to do? He's also trying to answer the question, what is passion? What is empathy? So let's jump up to page 38. So Mona, to answer your question, it is our default setting, hardwired into our boards at birth. By nature, we are meaning-making machines. This is not a matter of virtue. It's a matter of my choosing to do the work of somehow altering or getting free of my natural hardwired default setting, which is to be deeply and literally self-centered, and to see and interpret everything through the lens of self. You see, this is what he's saying. It's not about being egotistical, but it's about escaping the ego. You see the difference, right? The nature of default setting is interesting because the speech was, he committed suicide, by the way, the person who gave the speech. But when he gave the speech in 2005, keep in mind, there was no social media. Facebook was on the horizon. There was no Instagram, where these all became kind of platforms of projecting the self, right? Now, what is he basically saying? How do we escape our ego? How do we escape ourselves? Now, the idea of the default setting, in 2018, a book by Michael Pollan was written called How to Change Your Mind. And what was interesting about that book was Michael Pollan makes an argument about the only way to escape our default settings was through the use of psychedelics. In that case, in that book, the use of psychedelics is one of the ways, a fast way, beyond meditation. Meditation is the long, hard path to escape the sense of self and ego. What was he looking at in this book, which was a best-selling book, was that how do psychedelics do that? What do they interact with? His argument is it gets you to escape the default setting. It's fascinating he chose the words that Foster Wallace was acknowledging back in 2005. Probably the most dangerous thing about an academic education, so this goes to everyone in the room, is this, at least in my own case, he says, is that it enables my tendency to over-intellectualize stuff, to get lost in abstract thinking, instead of simply paying attention to what's going on in front of me. Instead of paying attention to what's going on inside of me. So this is why we're kind of here today. One reason we're kind of here today is to understand when we feel stressed, right? There's an effect on our body. And this is the question, if we rethink stress as an issue of caring and passion, could this have a less detrimental physiological effect on ourselves? Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. And that's also been kind of the exercise we've been doing today. Thinking about stress in this way is about exerting some kind of control. And what would this give us? Now, this would give us a different type of freedom. The freedom all to be lords of our tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to, and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. Now, let's go back to this. We talked about this. Thinking this way is my natural default setting. Every single one of us has a natural default setting. It's biological. It's our neurological networks at the end of the day. It's the automatic, unconscious way that I experience the boring, frustrating, crowded parts of adult life when I'm operating on the automatic, unconscious belief that I am the center of the world and that my immediate needs and feelings are what should determine the world's priorities. Now, what word does he introduce? The first word that we're dealing with in today's lecture. It will actually be within your power to experience a crowded, hot, slow, consumer hell type situation as not only meaningful, but sacred, on fire with the same force that lit the stars, compassion, love, the subsurface unity of all things. And this is what Michael Pollan argues in terms of kind of the therapeutic benefits of psychedelics, is that you get to see that unity of all things.
Sorry, would you mind giving a few insights on psychedelics?
Oh, towards the end, I will.
Okay.
Towards the end. I can't project on Michael Foster Wallace's speech, but I can project what it means for Michael Pollan's book. So I'm having him speak to Michael Pollan. This, I submit, is the freedom of real education, of learning how to be well-adjusted. You get to consciously decide what has meaning and what doesn't. So now to answer your question, Angel. Can you really be passionate about money? He doesn't use the word passion, he calls it worship. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you'll never have enough. That's the thing. When will you ever be satisfied? So this is what I would argue. That's not a real passion. Because having a lot of money, I would say that's an interest, right? You can negotiate over that. Does that define you? Is it a need? How about this? Never feel you have enough, he says. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. Again, so to worship your exterior appearance, it's not something to be passionate. On one level, we all know this stuff already. It's been codified as myths, proverbs, cliches, bromides, epigrams, parables. The skeleton of every great story. This one we could say the myth of Narcissus, where we get the word narcissistic from. Now look at this. Worship power. You will feel weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to keep the fear at bay. Think of every dictator, both dead and alive. Think of every dictator worships power. But when does a dictator ever feel, say, I have enough power, I'm secure in my position? Exactly. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart. And this goes for every professor. You will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. Hey, look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is they're not evil or sinful, is that they are unconscious. They are default settings. And the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the so-called real world of men and money and power comes along quite nicely on the fuel of, who said fear? And contempt and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in the way that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. So in other words, what am I getting to as we come to the end? How do you have empathy and compassion during global conflicts? Okay, it's to get out of your comfort zones, to stop worshiping yourself. By definition, when you practice empathy with those who suffer, and now when I say the word suffer, you see what I mean, and it's in this sense, right? You're breaking this cycle. So, this is just something, it was a book I read. It was published a while ago. It's called Blue Dreams. And it's talking about the other subject I teach. If I teach history of pandemics and illness, okay, the other subject I teach is the history of wellness. The opposite end of wellness is the history of medicine and drugs, right? So this was something from my other class that I teach on the history of drugs. This was a chapter that I had assigned a long time ago, but I thought it was, think about it, the way it kind of ends has a lot to do with what's going on in the world today. Look at the following. So this is, I think her chapter is on blue dreams. I think it was on psilocybin, otherwise the magic mushroom. But look what she writes here about its effects. And others have reported feeling a newfound empathy for friends, spouses, and children. It appears that the drug imparts beneficence, brings out the best in the humans who uses, eradicates the hubris at the heart of so many of our troubles, and leaves in a place and an open humility from which love and kindness easily flow. Imagine, now I just like her language here because it's kind of like the John Lennon song, Imagine, which by the way, you know was banned in the US after 9/11? Yes. Why would Imagine by John Lennon be banned, and I should say banned on the Clear station radio networks? The Clear, which is basically every single radio station though in the US. Because what is John Lennon talking about in the song Imagine? Yes?
He was calling for peace. And
Peace.
a
A world at peace when the US was about to invade Afghanistan. Yeah. So here she's asking about this word. Imagine just for kicks, our politicians take psilocybin, not at a Washington bash, but at a place where set and setting have been carefully constructed. Imagine the UN doing the same. Who was at the Model UN this weekend? Yeah, can you imagine that, a Model UN? Well, I was one of the guest speakers. I just said, hey, candidates, the world would be a better place if you all took shrooms. I couldn't have said that, of course, but this is what she's saying. Imagine even terrorists taking a substance that showed them how small they were in a world where everyone is intimately connected. What kind of priming would be necessary to bring out such revelations in our leaders? And even with proper priming, would the drug reveal such truth to a scar-hardened warrior? Or might the opposite happen? Does the drug, so she, and right here, remember this is all very young science because the science was banned for the longest time after the Nixon administration. Does the drug conform to the psyche of the person who takes it so that fighters would experience the valor of violence while cancer patients already laid low by their diagnoses experience their diminutiveness? Or does the drug lead us to, and this is the interesting thing, a platonic destination where an ineffable yet solid truth resides, a truth of the sacredness of consciousness and the utter significance of love? If this is true, then perhaps Griffiths is right, and psilocybin really could change the world by changing consciousness one mind at a time. So if you could just stop there. And or just go up to the very, I think I could do it. Sorry. Let me just go back. Yeah, if you could just go back to the first slide. No, the other direction. Sorry, go back to the last. Sorry. I was going the wrong direction. Kasura Bakwa. Okay, Zaman. Okay, if you want more on this, I highly recommend going to this podcast run by a former IE student. Okay, if you just type in Redefining Happiness with Ibrahim Al-Marashi to hear more. It's a podcast I did with an IE student who, before your club was founded, she was the club. So it was the Informer Club, and she did a series of very good podcasts, and I highly recommend that. So that's a very good place if you want to continue learning about what we talked about during this hour. But in the time we have remaining, does anyone have I just gave a variety of ways to rethink happiness, rethink empathy, rethink compassion, and what is this essence? And that doing so would all contribute to your own well-being at the end of the day. How do you show empathy and compassion during times of climate change and global conflicts? Not to feel apathy. Now we come to the end of our talk. What is this? Basically, how? Here's my answer. This is not the solution. If you're avoiding this, by definition, you're already taking part in showing kind of solidarity. with those who are suffering in the real physical sense as a result of the fluctuations from climate change, as a result of conflicts that are being fought as we speak. So I want to end on that note. Thank you, and now open up the floor to questions. Questions, comments, thoughts, interjections. The floor is yours. Yes.
Is it redundant or cheating to say that my passion is empathy?
Without empathizing with others, don't just do it with this word exercise. Without the ability to empathize with others, would you suffer?
Yes.
Yeah, then there you go. That's your passion. That's always the word. That's why I always say, just ask yourself that question. If you can give yourself that answer, then that's it. You found your passion. And nobody can take it away from you. You see, that's the thing. You might feel apathetic and powerless in the space of all what's going on in the world today. But as long as you have your empathy, then there you go. That's one thing that no politician can take from you, that no corporation can take from you. The end of the day. Okay, very good. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes.
Then would you say that the ultimate form of passion is presence, perfect presence?
The ultimate platonic destination, I would argue, yes, is that. That's what a good number of people like Michael Pollan and the author of this book were arguing, that that's what can be achieved through a lifetime of meditation, or the quick route also gives you that experience.
Oh, I also wanted to ask you before, sir. I just forgot about the psychedelics thing you were mentioning.
In terms of what? So this was the answer.
Oh,
Yeah, I was letting her answer to answer your question.
that was a thing. Okay.
Yeah, very good. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes, absolutely.
Can a passion be corrupted in the sense that we all have passions, but maybe your passion can get to a point that it's dangerous for others? And should we empathize with that passion?
Say it again.
So imagine that your passion, there's a point that you obsess so much with your passion that it gets other people in danger. For example, terrorists might have that passion for something specific that may lead them to be terrorists. Should we empathize with them, or there's a limit?
Think of what Hitler was passionate about. Yeah, you do not. Yeah, that guy, you can definitely say he was passionate. Not as a sexy romantic guy, like again, not that like it's in the Pasión de Morenas type of guy. Yeah, yes, and that passion led to ruin. Yeah, so you definitely would not empathize with him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one person's passion could take the world into the path of a global war. Yeah, definitely. But the problem is, till this day, people still empathize with him. Absolutely.
So you would say that like passion, if you like do not disturb the public order, like you can fulfill this passion, but if you disturb the community, your passions.
Oh, this is interesting. Greta Thunberg, it depends. And I think again we get to the subjectiveness you talked about. Some people would say Greta Thunberg's passion disrupted the public order, and it was a good thing. Then if you ask like this misogynist like Andrew Tate, if that was a good thing, I mean, if you think of the fight that they got into, he would say, no, it was not. So there you go. You're all bringing up a good point. Yes. Charlotte.
Just say that ideologies have something in passion, in
Okay.
collective passion.
Really good question. So ideologies, and for those of you who are my students, we study them, usually have an ism that ends in it, right? So let's say fascism is about a collective passion for a nation. And in the case of fascism, it was a collective passion for Italy. That led us to World War II. And then its German variant, Nazism, was a collective passion for Germany. And then the other variant, nationalism, as an ideology, is creating passion for a imagined entity that we call the nation, right? For most of human history, there were no nations until we entered the modern era. So very good question. Yes, ideologies are about collective passions. Absolutely. Any hand up? No?
Yeah.
No?
No.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Okay, excellent. So that's it. Oh, yes.
But do you think that maybe even if you have achieved presence, you may align even more with what your ego is driving you towards, in the sense, if I'm not present and I'm just dragged by whatever, it may be the case that my ego drives me to doing something good. But if I'm so present that I'm fully aware of something negative that my ego is driving me to undergo, then it's not necessarily something possible.
What do you have in mind?
I don't know. Imagine, I don't know.
I mean,
Just my moment, my true moment, just ask me to right now stand up and start swearing at everyone.
sure, I mean, how would you achieving your presence make you? I see where you're going, and yes, could it have negative consequences? Perhaps, yes. I mean, have you reached kind of a moment where you reach such clarity that takes you on a very dangerous road? Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Perhaps, yeah. Perhaps a good number of the kind of dictators in the past.
So in that case, you just need moral standards to somehow stop it.
Exactly. So, very good. Any other last minute questions, thoughts? All right. Do you want the final word? Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, my passion is the Wellbeing Club, and we need to have you registered and check in for us to continue having these type of events for your well-being and for your interests. So if you take a moment to check in, I would really appreciate it.
And I could also make a shout out. Do you know for the Wellbeing Center, there are weekly meditation ceremonies on every Wednesday, 12:30 to 1 to 1:30, led by Shane O'Connor. I highly recommend that as well. Yeah. All right, very good. Hope you find your passion, everyone, today. Thank you. Meeting earlier. This really stop recording again. Yes.
Maybe try it.
Let's go this way.
Well, you have to speak about that and go out like nothing to that. It's not about it's about you like when it's about
Together, so we're just translating together.
We have like the
but like really
It's very fun sessions.
I don't want to speak about it.
I don't know
like register.
You're the one leaving from the conversation. Probably overrated.
It was good. I just also especially.
Ya, yo creo que por eso lo ponen.
Chingado, me voy. It's like my best
Oh, is what is it? Are you enjoying it though?
Yeah.
Because it's huge. I know it's over there.
I started yesterday.
And you're already like halfway through.
خلينا نحكي مع حالنا انتوا.
That's so impressive, girl, honestly.
I have like so many
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming. See you in club. Oh, 6 o'clock too, yes. Thanks.
Is the Iranian women talk today?
6 o'clock, yes.
It's the same as this one? It's the same as this one?
Subject?
Yeah?
No, entirely different.
Thank you.
It's on the
Wait,
web.
you didn't register. Some people
no,
didn't register.
It's on,
I kind of
The
counted,
registration was
so-
good.
Yeah,
it's on,
I'll add you manually. Or if you can tell me your name.
do you remember the woman who was killed in Iran last year and there was an uprising?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Send us an email.
It's today, it's 6 p.m., yeah. Or, I mean, it's good, you guys should come.
Yeah, we're coming.
Yeah.
Sí, ya las
I'm talking about Turkey as well.
Además,
6 p.m. Talking about the Turkey. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
No, I have another meeting.
It's great questions.
Hi, Mahal.
Te quería interrumpir a mitad de Javier para preguntarte cosas de luz. Yo le dije, no le escribas, déjalo vivir.
Ah, me preguntó dónde estaba, si ya me están diciendo que te estaba acosando. De la que tenía en el calendario una foto.
Sorry,
¿En serio?